So Judge Mershon ruled that Donald Trump had violated his gag order for the 10th time. And this time, in a written order, Judge Mershon wrote that he may have to consider jail time for future violations. Welcome to Law and Society, and let's briefly talk about this. So, my question is, will Judge Mershon ever incarcerate Donald Trump? Because the way that these violations are stacking up and the way that the DA is wanting fines only, it seems that both the court and the prosecutor, they are handling this extremely carefully and treating Donald Trump with satin gloves. And after the order came out, Donald Trump's allies went nuts. Here you have Newt Gingrich saying, an appointed corrupt judge who I believe is about to put Trump in prison. By what right does a judge put a former president in prison? Just ask yourself, what would it be like to be Trump in prison in New York? Well, Newt, the judge does have the power to incarcerate Donald Trump based on the judicial rules that he abides by as a judge in the state of New York. And in New York, when you have violations of a gag order, you are fined in the first instance. And then it is up to the discretion of the DA and then the judge to whether or not to impose the incarceration sanction. And the judge has that power. It's not about right. It's not about having the right to do it. It's having the power to do it because the judge is the sitting judge in a criminal trial of a former president who is currently a private citizen and a criminal defendant. So, Newt Gingrich just, and then he goes on to say, in an ideal world, the Supreme Court would proactively intervene, strip this judge of the case. Well, this is a state court. The jurisdiction that the Supreme Court of the United States has is very limited here and on constitutional grounds. And the idea that, the Supreme Court would just undermine the criminal trial process in New York and then forego the appellate process of the state of New York and then take up a case if needed upon ruling by the Supreme Court of New York. Now, in New York it's called the Appellate Court of New York, New York Court of Appeals. In New York, the lower court is called the Supreme Court, and judges are called justices. So this is actually Justice Mershon. But in the understanding of the federal jurisdiction and how laws work, he's the judge and then has to go up the appellate circuit into the highest court in New York, which is the appellate court. So it's a little sort of nomenclature issue here. So, but Newt is talking about the Supreme Court of the United States, and that's why I made that point. And then you have Alina Habba say he threatened to put Trump in jail for speaking. He didn't even speak. He reposted things of what other people said. So here, Ms. Habba is trying to argue that that's not speech that he's reposting. Retweets are not endorsements. But really, when you are sending a message for all intents and purposes, if you repost something, you are doing it with the purpose of amplifying it or letting others in your circles see what that is. Laura Trump if this judge puts Trump in jail, think about the future of America. I don't think people will react well to it. Well, the future of America will be strong because it will reassert the rule of law and say nobody is above the law. And a vast majority of the American people would react quite well to it and take comfort in knowing that the rule of law holds everybody accountable, no matter how rich you are, no matter how powerful you were, or no matter how powerful you may become again. We live right now in that twilight zone where Donald Trump is a private citizen and he has been indicted, in this case in New York, for 34 violations. And the judge in the case has the power to put him in jail. The question is whether he will put him in jail. The last thing I want to just briefly mention here is that as you see these 10 gag order violations and then 2 gag order violations in the civil case in New York, keep in mind that this demonstrates Donald Trump's reckless disregard for the rule of law. He believes himself to be above the rule of law. I mean, he's arguing that in the immunity case that Supreme Court needs to rule on ASAP. He's arguing that by his conduct in New York, by violating the gag order over and over and over again. The court and the DA needs to push for something closer to incarceration. Put a monitor on his social media and campaign posts. Make one of his attorneys responsible for it so that if Donald Trump does that, along with Donald Trump, that attorney will also go to jail for contempt. Do something where he is limited in what he can say in his social media. Or, put him in jail for the duration of one day's trial proceedings to give him a taste of what it feels like to be in holding. That could start the incarceration. The judge doesn't have to incarcerate for 30 days in the very beginning. He doesn't have to incarcerate even for one full day. Just put Donald Trump in holding for the duration of one day's trial proceedings on the day that you rule on the next gag order violation. Because the likelihood that somebody who has violated the gag order 10 times will do it in 11th and 12th times is much higher than not. So with that said, thank you so much for being here. Please like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon.